Facsimile number 1 of the Book of Abraham visually depicts the narrative contained in Abraham 1:12-19, as interpreted by Joseph Smith. This scene depicts Abraham fastened upon an altar before some idolatrous gods. An idolatrous priest is about to sacrifice Abraham, who is protected by the angel of the Lord. Since the mid-1800s, when Egyptologists first began analyzing the facsimiles of the Book of Abraham, Joseph Smith's interpretation of this scene, sometimes called a lion couch scene, due to the prominent lion couch at the center of the illustrations, has clashed with Egyptological interpretations. In 1860, the French Egyptologist Theodore de Veria interpreted Facsimile 1 as depicting the resurrection of the god Osiris. In 1912, Egyptologists interpreted Facsimile 1 as variously the well-known scene of Anubis preparing the body of the dead man, a resurrection scene showing Osiris rising from the dead, an embalmer preparing a body for funeral, the body of the dead lying on a funerary bier, and a dead man lying on a bier and being prepared for mummification. Similar interpretations of Facsimile 1 have been given in more recent years. From the weight of the Egyptological authority alone, it may seem absurd to associate Facsimile 1 with sacrifice as Joseph Smith did. However, more recent investigation has turned up evidence which suggests a connection between sacrifice or sacred violence and scenes of the embalming and resurrection of the deceased, or the god Osiris. In 2008 and 2010, Egyptologist John Gee published evidence linking scenes of Osiris's mummification and resurrection in the roof chapels of the Dendara temple with execration rituals that involved ritual violence. Other Egyptologists have already drawn parallels between Facsimile 1 and the Dendara temple lion couch scenes, but as Gee has elaborated, there is a clear connection with sacrifice and ritual violence in these scenes. In the Dendara text, the word for the lion couch is either homophonous or identical with the word abattoir, slaughterhouse, as well as a term for offerings. This is reinforced in the inscriptions surrounding the lion couch scenes. For example, in the central scene in the innermost eastern chapel, we read, quote, "He will not exist, nor will his name exist, since you will destroy his town, cast down the walls of his house, and everyone who is in it will be set on fire. You will demolish this district. You will stab his confederates, his flesh being ashes, the evil conspirator consigned to the lion couch slaughterhouse, so that he will no longer exist." Furthermore, in the same chapel, we have depictions of Anubis and the sons of Horus, presumably the figures under a lion couch in Facsimile 1, holding knives. Anubis is here identified as the one who smites the adversaries with his might, since the knife is in his hand, to expel the one who treads in transgression. "I am the violent one who came forth from God after having cut off the heads of the confederates of him whose name is evil." The human-headed son of Horus is identified above his head as the one who repulses enemies, and who comes tearing out the enemies, who butchers the sinners. The baboon-headed son of Horus says, "I have slaughtered those who create injuries in the house of God. In his presence, I take away the breath from his nostrils." The jackal-headed son of Horus says, "I cause the hostile foreigners to retreat." Finally, the falcon-headed god of Horus says, "I have removed rebellion." From this and other evidence collected by Gee, it can be seen that at least some ancient Egyptians associated the lion couch scene with the sacrificial slaughter of enemies. Why might some ancient Egyptians have done so? It may relate to the myth of the resurrection of the god Osiris, which lion couch scenes were meant to depict. In the classic retelling of the myth, Osiris was slain and mutilated by his evil brother Seth. Through the efforts of his sister wife, Isis, the body of Osiris was magically reassembled and resurrected. The final vindication came when their son Horus slew Seth in battle and claimed kingship. The element in this myth of Osiris slaying Seth and thereby the forces of chaos or disorder, including foreign peoples, rebels, and enemies of Pharaoh, might explain why sacrifice was associated with embalming and mummification in some ancient Egyptian texts. Interestingly, another papyrus from the 1st century BC, not far removed from the time period of the Joseph Smith papyri, quote, comments on the fate suffered in the embalming place during the final stages of mummification by one who was overly concerned with amassing wealth while alive, end of quote. As read in the text, it is the chief of the spirits who is first to punish after the taking of breath. Juniper oil, incense, natron, and salt, searing ingredients, are a remedy for his wounds. A friend who shows no mercy attacks his flesh. He is unable to say desist before the punishment of the aggressor. Commenting on this passage, Mark Smith observes that in this text, the embalming table, the lion couch, is also a judge's tribunal, and the chief embalmer, Anubis, doubles as the judge who executes sentence. For the wicked man, mummification, the very process which is supposed to restore life and grant immortality, becomes a form of torture from which no escape is possible. Indeed, that Anubis had a role as judge of the dead, besides merely being an embalmer, has been previously acknowledged by Egyptologists. One task Anubis fulfilled with this role was as a guard or protector who administered horrible punishments to the enemies of Osiris. From surviving evidence, it is evident that Anubis must have been engaged in the warding off of evil influences, and it is conceivable that he did so as a judge. One Egyptian text even identifies Anubis as a butcher slaying the enemies of Osiris, while another states that such butchers are in fact a company of magistrates. As a reckoner of hearts, Anubis was the elicitor of the punishment of the enemies of Osiris. So, from the perspective of the ancient Egyptians, the process of embalming and mummification included elements of ritual violence against evildoers or agents of chaos. The punishment of enemies by a judge is simply a part of the protective ritual enacted in connection with the embalmment of the deceased. It is thus reasonable to insist, as Guy does, that excluding a sacrificial dimension to lion couch scenes is an un-Egyptian, even if we cannot come up with one definitive reading of Facsimile 1 at this time.